July 23rd, 2022. Well, I wanted to address the issue of this January 6th committee again, since they've had their second and primetime free political commercial sponsored by all the major networks out there, which basically turned into a major Trump bashing exercise, as you'd expect. And again, I watched it, so maybe you didn't have to. But I think it's important to kind of know what's going on with this sort of thing, to kind of get a handle on what's happening in politics. And I guess this particular one featured Matthew Pottinger and Sarah Matthews. Kind of interesting how the Matthew keeps coming up there, but and it were the witnesses that were sworn in, who are two people who are in tune enough with the committee that they didn't have to edit what they said. They could actually have them doing live testimony. Many of the other people, you had to have edited snippets from their depositions, so we're not sure really what they really were saying or meaning to say for the most part, because they didn't trust them to be live, which I think shows how slanted this committee really is. These two individuals, one was a deputy national security advisor who apparently worked his way up through the ranks during the 4 years of the Trump administration. The other one was a deputy communications person who both of whom resigned the day of January the 6th. I guess they're off the Trump team now, huh? So anyhow, like I said, I'll kind of get into that. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. It helps with the algorithm. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And comments are appreciated. And you can, of course, forward links to this to anybody that might be interested. So essentially what we're treated to, and there's a lot of deception in the way they present things. They edit out things that are exculpatory for Trump. And some things are just downright deceptive. One thing I noticed was that at one point, as they got into this, and the whole theme was there's this 3-hour period where the riot between when he made his speech and where he made this statement telling people to go home. What was he doing? And of course, he wasn't doing what they thought he should be doing. Perhaps he wasn't even doing what I thought he should be doing, but that's a different issue. And so they kind of got into this whole thing. But one thing I thought was really out of place was the place where Ashley Babbitt was shot. They didn't show that part of it, but they showed what happened right before there, where these people were ramming something into the door of the House chamber. If you recall that scene, it was rightly after that she was shot. And they presented that as what was happening right at the time that he made his statement telling people to go home. But I think if we recall, that actually happened quite a bit earlier, I think, in the whole riot. So that was out of place and clearly deceptive. Then they take cheap shots at various Republicans, of course, in there. They have a thing with Josh Hawley apparently running from the crowd. Well, I think why shouldn't he be? I mean, everybody else was getting out of Dodge too, and we don't know how close the crowd was to him and what the attitude of that particular group was. And so, that's kind of what you get with this fake committee, I guess. Basically, as always, there's not a whole lot in there that we didn't already know, I guess, in general, if anybody followed it. I guess some people feel like putting it all together tells us something we should draw a conclusion from. My general opinion is the whole January 6th event was a complete mistake from start to finish. I don't think, as I've said in other videos, it had no chance of success. And since it had no chance of success, at best it would be a protest of sorts. And the point is that at that late date, what's the point? I mean, but nonetheless, they did it. And of course, Democrats have done protests before. However, I guess this is the prize winner of all post-election protests. And you have to say that about it. They try to present the idea that Trump was leading an armed mob to the Capitol. Well, actually, there were some reports by some people, scattered reports, that some people thought that some people in the crowd were armed. I don't know if this was ever confirmed that they really were armed or they just looked like they might have been. But the key fact is that none of the rioters fired off a weapon at all during the whole thing. And I don't believe very many were arrested with one, if any. But certainly nobody fired a weapon at anybody, except for the Capitol Police that shot Ashley Babbitt. So this idea of the armed mob is kind of, another fake thing they kind of throw out there. And actually, the thing that they didn't mention was that the people that conducted the riot, that started the breach to the Capitol, had left the speech well before Trump was through speaking, if they ever attended it, and they were totally set on breaking into the Capitol. And of course, they didn't mention that, did they? So my view is that basically the whole effort was hijacked by a few radical groups, the Proud Boys, 3%ers, and the Oath Keepers. I think that those groups kind of coordinated together and basically hijacked this protest. And so that's kind of the way I see this. Then there's a whole big thing about the supposed altercation in the Beast, which he actually wasn't in the Beast, he was in an SUV. But at any rate, in the SUV, about wanting to go to the Capitol. And of course, the Secret Service, knowing that a riot was going on, said it's too dangerous for you to go there, is what they were telling him. And so who knows what would have happened if he somehow would have gotten there, if he could have gotten there with all that crowd. I mean, who knows what would have happened. I don't believe that he ever had any intention, by the way, if he could have gone there, I guess to make some kind of a statement. I don't know how he was going to make the statement, but I don't think he was planning on leading a crowd to break into the Capitol. And in fact, maybe if he'd been there, the whole thing may have not spun out of control like it did. Or he might have been personally in danger after all. I don't know. But the idea was completely unacceptable to the Secret Service from a security point of view, obviously. And that's yet they keep pounding away on this idea that he had this plan, like that it was all his plan to attack the Capitol. In reality, of course, the attack on the Capitol totally destroyed his election challenge idea anyhow, because basically I think that the riot and its aftermath probably actually sped up the process of confirmation, because otherwise you'd have gone through several states being challenged and having a 2-hour debate and then coming back for the next challenge. And so the thing would have probably taken at least as long, if not longer, to get to the final result, which I think happened at 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that, local time. So in other words, the idea that really delayed things is probably also kind of goofy. And like I said, the whole thing was misguided. I think basically Trump allowed a situation to spin out of control because he didn't take into account carefully enough the dangerous groups that were there. The other thing I would point out is that they keep mentioning it was really Nancy Pelosi's responsibility to call for the National Guard to be there, right? I mean, it had been offered to her and it had been rejected. In fact, the head of the Capitol Police had actually repeatedly requested extra support and been turned down by Pelosi. Of course, the committee doesn't mention any of that. So, again, that shows how goofed up things are, and this whole situation. And of course, then they have some interesting outtakes of Trump obviously, did call for them to remain peaceful, and then they go to some intercept that they managed to find, obviously digging through everything, where some group of rioters were talking, going, well, he said don't hurt the police, but he didn't say don't hurt the congressman, as if somehow that was implied that was what he thought would be happening. My own opinion is, given Trump's nature, he didn't want to be taking the position of turning on his own supporters, which, remember, the majority of people that were there were not rioters. Most of those people there were just to attend the speech and maybe to protest. Okay. A small group of radicals started a riot and basically breached the Capitol, leading to other people just kind of walking on in after the doors had been opened and then later getting charged with a crime. But the point is that the people that really did the most damage was a relatively small group of the whole crowd. And so I can see why he didn't want to actually trash the whole crowd, who were mostly his supporters, who'd come to hear his speech and everything. Um, so, that's where I think that they're really off base and they're just doing a biased political narrative. And of course, the most disgusting thing of the whole thing is Liz Cheney and Kinzinger. I mean, Cheney particularly. I mean, she had a leading role, the number 3 position in the House leadership on the Republican side, and she's totally allying herself with the Democrats, not objecting to anything they do there, even things that are clearly attacks like on Senator Hawley. What is that about? I mean, she has no willingness to say, hey, I'll support you, but I'm not going to go there. No, she goes along 100% with the Democrat line, 100%. And on this committee, and this is where I think that we're waiting for her day of reckoning here in August when she loses her primary, which I sincerely hope she does. And I think that that we can, take some happiness in that idea, because on the other hand, I will have to say for Trump that I think that he really politically misjudged the whole thing. I mean, he was continually advised by everybody, and they did bring this out, that they should go off and call for these people to go home, and he definitely should have done that earlier, obviously. I don't know whether he somehow thought this was some good that this was happening. It's hard to know. I mean, Trump is a kind of a strange cat when it comes to things like this. I mean, he had a similar freeze up, I think, during the Charlottesville incident and also the George Floyd incident, where he lets his emotions get away from political necessity. Given the fact you're dealing with stuff that's going to be widely twisted by the press, you got to kind of go along and state what they expect you to say, or else it rebounds against you, even if you didn't do anything wrong. And that's where you get into those kind of situations, I think. But anyhow, certainly there's been a clear split between Trump and Pence now, which I think is very unfair to Pence, but that's the way it is. Because and now of course they're actually working against each other. I mean, you have, Trump is supporting Purdue in the Georgia gubernatorial primary, and Pence is supporting Kemp, and something similar is going on now on the Arizona primary, which I think this is, well, whatever it's going to be. I suppose they're both going to run for president in 2024, looking at the way things are, along with several other people. And my own opinion on this is, and this will probably happen, that it all comes down to the question of whether or not the Biden Justice Department decides to actually file criminal charges against Trump based on some kind of concocted thing, which I'm sure they can do it, given the nature of the juries in D.C. and the judges in D.C. I don't see what would necessarily stop them from simply going along with some theory and going with it. I mean, the jury will probably buy it in D.C., So, you have that kind of situation. But anyhow, that's kind of why I think this is really a sham committee, and I don't know, pretty disgusting in my opinion. And Liz Cheney is most disgusting of all. Kinzinger, well, I think that guy is a real loser, totally. And the Democrats actually redistricted him out of a district, so he doesn't even get to run for re-election. Yet he plays into their hands like a complete fool. At any rate, and I guess these people think they're somehow saving the system or something. And that's the final thing I'd say about it. All this thing did, at worst, is it put the system through a stress test, and the system passed with flying colors. There was no way the election was going to get overturned. There was no way there was going to be a coup. All there was going to be at most was a bit of a disturbance. And that's that. So anyhow, anyway, I'll close this for now. And by the way, my the my account, my various social media accounts are in the description below. And I'll wrap this up for this time.